I'm Nye with Soulful Expeditions, and today is Myth Busting Monday, where we combat widespread myths about Black history and culture. The myth that we are going to be discussing today is the myth that house slaves had better lives than field slaves, and that they were just living a high life, because that's just not true. So let's talk about it. And I think the people most to blame for this is Hollywood, right? The first thing you think of Hollywood is like, okay, it's all light skins and they just living this high life and they're on the side of the master and they don't really have to do anything. Like, they're more like a servant. Like, no, they were still slaves. And so Quentin Tarantino and Samuel L. Jackson, count your days, because they weren't living like this, man. They were not. Okay, they were not. So let's talk about field slaves, right? Field slaves had to work 12 hours a day in the sun, no matter how they felt, sun up to sundown. They had an overseer watching them. If they didn't feel good, they would get a beating to make them feel even worse than they already were. They were given scraps to eat, food that was barely fit for an animal. They were confined to very small slave quarters, where disease, was running rampant. It could have been 12 people in a small room. It was awful. Okay, it was truly awful. There is no electricity or refrigeration here. So, like, everything they're having to cook, these animals, they're getting, like, off the road, cooking them all day. They're doing everything from scratch, like, literally from scratch. This is the 1800s. They're cleaning all day, every day, cooking all day, every day, laundry. There's no washers and dryer here. You are doing this manually. That is very tedious labor. You are at the beck and call of the master, the master's wives, the master's children. You 24 hours a day. You might go in your room at night like, okay, finally. And they call you again, not getting a second to rest. Then you have the wife. She's mad at you because you had a baby for her husband. Girl, I don't want your husband. Your husband came up in here against my will because I didn't have a choice in the matter. So they're mad. You don't believe me? Read Harriet Jacobs' Diary of a Slave Girl. She talks about how she hid in the attic for 7 years to escape the advances of her master because she didn't want it. So it wasn't peaches and cream being a house slave either. She also talks about how the wife of the master would spit in the pans so that they would not get the remnants of the food that they cooked, because the cruelty was the point. And that brings us the legacy of systemic rape, because 17% of African Americans have European ancestry. And the people that were more likely to be raped or to bear those children were house slaves because they were in such close proximity with the masters. So whether they were in the house or the field, slavery was dehumanizing, and they faced unspeakable horrors that, we probably couldn't even imagine. Slave masters used any divisions they could to try to divide enslaved people. But they had unity, and they had each other. And that's the goal of Soulful Expeditions.